Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
I was 8 years old whenever 9/11 happened.
I was 15 years old.
I was 6 years old.
I was 24 years old.
I was 41 years old.
I was 22 years old.
I was 20 years old.
All right, 9/11. Vivid memory. 28 years old.
I was 18 years old when 9/11 happened.
I was 34 years old.
Yeah, 9/11, 2001, I was 33-year-old.
So when you start talking about 9/11, especially with me, people ask, how do you remember that? You were 6, you were too young. There's not much about that day I don't remember.
If people remember, 9/11 was a clear, sunny day.
I was a 10th grader at Syosset High School, which is on Long Island, New York. That's about a 45-minute drive from Manhattan. And it was just a very eerie day, especially being so close to where it happened.
I definitely remember 9/11. I was working at Davidson Middle School.
I was interning with the United States Golf Association, living in Columbia, South Carolina, and had actually just been in New York about 3 weeks prior for training. And so I had come home, and New York's really a special place to me. The first time I ever got to go there was with our DECA class in high school. Miss Livingston took me there as a junior in high school, and so I love New York City.
My wife, Julie, and I were in Louisville, Kentucky.
I was a first-year coordinator at Nassau Community College.
I was sitting in Gulfport, Mississippi. I was with the Air National Guard. We were actually in a commander's
All
meeting.
right, I was in my first year teaching, or second year teaching at Heritage Middle School.
It was a very scary day.
And it was, I don't know, I mean, my emotions, I remember just being in shock.
On the morning of September 11th, I was in Dr. Rosemary Potter's children's literature course at Maryville College.
We're sitting there having our discussion about what's going on the base, had the TV on mute, started looking up, started seeing that first airplane go into the Trade Center. Kind of thought it was maybe just a movie preview or whatever, and then we basically started continuing our conversation, then seeing the second one come in, and then it was like, okay, something's going on, let's turn the volume up, and then that's when we found out our nation was under attack.
Right.
So.
I remember being in my office.
Bypassing the cafeteria, and there were TVs on, and everybody was quiet.
Our football secretary comes in and says a plane had just hit the Twin Towers.
So I stuck my head in the cafeteria, and it was on the TV, and it was being played on our TVs in our cafeteria. And the solemn look and the frightening looks on our students' faces, I'll never forget.
And I'd gone down the hall in our hotel. They said there was a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center.
So when the first towers hit, I was sitting in math class. I remember it very clearly. A student walked into our class and said that a plane had hit the World Trade Center tower.
And I just remember going to work that morning, and I worked in this little closet of an office with the South Carolina Golf Association, and one of my coworkers came back there and said, "Have you been on the internet?" So I pulled things up and started to see some things, and we saw where the first plane had hit. And
I remember I was in elementary school whenever 9/11 happened. I remember they took us to the library because there was a whole lot of confusion going on, and as students, obviously being that young, we were confused. I remember seeing the second plane hit the second tower during, while we were in the library.
So we sat and watched speculation as to what had actually occurred at the time, and a little while later we saw live on the news feed the second plane crash into the other tower.
I mean, we probably stayed up there in awe for 45 minutes. Like I said, just staring across the Hudson River and seeing just mass chaos. Actually saw the whole thing come down, saw the towers crumble, and just sat there with my jaw open.
Then when the second plane hit, we realized this is a lot bigger than an aeronautical error.
We were sitting in class, and a TA came in, spoke with Miss Adsit. I don't know what was said, but Miss Adsit started crying, and it was at that moment I knew something was wrong.
We were very scared at first. We didn't know what was going on.
And then as the morning progressed, the second plane hit, and then reports started to come out about what was actually happening. And then not too long after that, but I remember by the time I was in lunch, the towers had come down and people were, going in and out of the library kind of to watch the video. All sports were canceled that day, which, football practice, soccer practice for people, everything was canceled, which never happened.
The sports page from that day, games must wait, and it talks about Major League Baseball and the SEC to make decisions on games happening. I was working in the golf industry, and we had a major tournament coming up in South Carolina, and we had kids flying in from all over the country, and there were no flights happening, and so most of them canceled.
Really thrown off, knowing something was wrong, but at that age not fully understanding exactly what was happening. Our parents picked us up, went home that day, and everything just kind of shut down.
And then it became apparent that it was terrorism. I remember we were staying near the airport, and there were 0 planes in the air at the orders of the White House, and that was just a spooky, odd feeling.
Remember my buddy came over, we were just hanging out because we had no football practice, and it was really the first time in my life where you didn't feel like as an American you were invincible, because to that point, I wasn't alive for a major war, and you always felt like you were 1,000% safe on American soil. And that was really the first time that you realized that we had enemies and they were not afraid to attack us.
So just changed our world, changed our country. I hate that it happened, but it really is something that I'm grateful for, the opportunities I had at Heritage that took me to New York for the very first time, and then opportunities after that made me love being in a big city and wanting to visit big cities, and I'm very thankful for those things.
I think that was a lot of good that came out of 9/11, especially for people like me that were so young, but it's kind of stuck with me. I think about my students here at school all the time. They weren't even born. So it's hard for them to fathom that. I pray they never go through anything like that. But I pray that if they do, they experience that feel of that patriotism and that feel of America and being strong.
All right, so following 9/11, I remember everyone coming together, helping each other. And really, you've never really seen that. New Yorkers, especially in New York City, are typically not the most friendly people, but really everyone came together, was helping each other. I also will never forget a sporting event. The Mets were playing the Braves when it was the height of their rivalry, and I'll never forget when Mike Piazza hit a home run to beat the Braves. It might have been maybe a week after 9/11, and it's probably one of the most memorable plays in New York sports history. Even though it was a regular season game, it just felt like it had a lot more meaning than that.
It was sad. And how did I feel? At first, it's just like, you've been struck, so you want to strike back, which we don't do. Okay, and we were mad, and we're going to find out who did it, and and then we have to be smarter. So how do we keep this from occurring again? And what is the process so things like this doesn't happen? And now we're talking about safe schools and safe banks or whatever, and courthouses and things of that nature, and it just starts to roll. And it really turned our nation upside down.
I think the events of that day have changed the world, much like the events of World War II. Some for the good, safety measures, and a lot of it for the bad.
Everybody's kind of like walking around with a somber feeling. It was just a weird day, a bad day for America, but it was also a time where America come together. It really unified our country, and it was a bad thing that turned into a good thing as far as unifying our country.
And truly, that patriotism kind of speaks, You know, there's generations that have come before us that have experienced that due to war, due to attacks. You know, I think of Pearl Harbor. You know, there was so much patriotism after that, and you know, you've got the greatest generation, and then you've got things that happened, you know, in the 70s, the 80s, in the 9/11. It's like every generation experiences that moment of, I'm part of this, and yes, this is a bad situation, but I'm going to stand up for my country and be proud of my country.
But then throughout the coming days after that, you know, seeing the country come together and how everybody, no matter what background you were from, you know, what demographic you were from, what socioeconomic background you were from, everybody coming together to for a common goal and a common like unity was something special to see.
Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties, over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned our good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this.